The year is 2012. I had just returned home from sleepaway camp for the first year, and I craved internet access due to my early indoctrination into sites like Newgrounds and SmackGeez. At the time, I had been exposed in the past to shows like Naruto through Toonami and Pokemon reruns that played on Cartoon Network, and had dove deeper into the blossoming Western anime fandom with shows like Needless and Gurren Lagann. My mother, in her infinite wisdom and desire for easier access to books to read before bed, had bought a Kindle Paperwhite while I was away for the summer. A device with access not only to the internet and Amazon's near-endless catalog of literature, but also to a large plethora of Western comics. And manga. Light novels too, books with English translations I had never seen before, later volumes of shonen that weren't sold at my local Barnes & Noble. I took this information like any feeble-minded 12-year-old with an anime fixation would and quickly downloaded a plethora of books. It was a time of my life where anime and manga were still this cool thing that was only talked about in hushed whispers or over the internet on designated forums. This was the period of time when Gigguk was still doing the anime zone and Podtaku was barely a glimmer in anyone's eye, where memes were top text, bottom text abominations without any sense of irony. This was a more innocent period in my life, probably a lot of our lives if you grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s. Anime was cool, off the beaten path, from a country across the world and only enjoyed by people that were deemed one word and one word only: otaku. Things are much different now. Anime is not only mainstream, but highly profitable for the megacorporations that be. We don't have fan subs released on VHS or 4Kids airing butchered dubs. We have Netflix and Disney hopping on the licensing train as the New York Times bestseller list is flooded with manga volumes and one-shots. Anime cons aren't cozy little friend meetups or excuses to watch AMVs in a dark room next to the dealer's room where you'd buy a really overpriced figurine. Now they're huge corporate events where you buy 3 overpriced figurines because they have one of your favorite gacha character. If the 2000s were a highly formulative period for the internet and how we interact with entertainment, the 2010s unified tastes through social media, and the advent of streaming granted people more access to this once niche realm of storytelling. As I'm about to graduate from my undergrad and move on to the world of adulthood and graduate studies, I find myself drifting toward that period of my life where my weebhood was still developing. And with that journey down memory lane, I rediscovered something that I feel like only a small few had read over the years. Something that was at least financially profitable for a time for an independent publisher that was just making a name for itself. 7 Seas Entertainment was founded in 2004 by Jason DeAngelis, an anime fan first and foremost who decided to independently publish manga for a North American reader base, especially those manga that wouldn't be published through traditional means. Boys love, girls love, even the occasionally controversial lolly manga that no one should ever read. 7 Seas cut their teeth on the profane and the bombastic to get sales in their early years. Nowadays, they publish all sorts of material under different banners, including webcomics like Killing Stalking and hardcover, even winning an Eisner for the English release of My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. Yet circling back to its origins and the material that put 7 Seas on the map, there's one title that sticks out more than the rest. A title pitched to DeAngelis and published under his discretion by an unlikely source who worked his way into the company's upper brass. Adam Arnold was a freelance otaku journalist for the website Anime Fringe, which he started with an internet buddy in the year 2000 and formally wrapped up production in around 2005. Arnold would periodically get articles published in Anime Insider and the like, eventually being tapped to make the website for 7 Seas Entertainment due to his development of Anime Fringe's site. Also, DC Comics fan sites. This man has my whole heart.
You're too good for this world.
Eventually building a great working relationship with DeAngelis and the staff at 7 Seas, Arnold would become a senior editor for the publication sometime during 2005 to 2006. And during this time where he was rising into a more managerial position, he was able to pitch something he had an idea for based on his experiences in the American anime community. What started as a shoujo romance in a college anime club evolved into a harem comedy surrounding the members of a very special club on a fictional college campus. With DeAngelis' approval after a period of polishing, an initial webcomic was published on 7 Seas' new venture, GoManga.com. That title was Owie House. Originally a webcomic drawn by Jim Jimenez and published directly on Go Manga's website, Owie House's initial 36 pages would prove good enough as a proof of concept to move on to print publication. While letting go of Jimenez as lead artist, Jimenez would actually return to help the Owie House project through his band, the J Brothers, creating an original anime music video animated in Flash using the art from the new artist Shihei. It's really reminiscent of early Flash animations on Newgrounds, full of tweening and messy shading, but an odd level of charm. Shihei's art itself is something I feel like I should talk about a bit, because depending on your opinion, it may not be your cup of tea. While Jimenez's art is reminiscent of something like Strangers in Paradise or early Matt Wagner, Shihei's work is clearly much more shoujo manga influenced. Soft features, big eyes, the general vibe of what you'd think is manga at the time from a cursory glance. Yet, under a lens, it's almost reminiscent of draw-your-own-manga books, its best pages leaning on the typical trappings you'd find in even the most generic of manga. The emotional panel done with soft lighting and hard shading, the roses when something beautiful is on screen even for comedic effect, splash pages with strip panels on the sides. It's really tropey and kind of generic, which I do think hold back some moments from being truly great compared to other manga of its ilk. That aspect is both a pro and a con for this labor of love. Because it is a labor of love. Really. It's the first original project Adam Arnold worked on, something that evolved over the course of its run from a standard slice-of-life manga surrounding a fascination with anime culture into... well, we'll get to that. The point is that the manga being drawn in this way, despite it being somewhat flat at times comparably to your Alharu Rides or To Love Ruse, is an intentional and fairly serviceable part of the Owie House experience. I'd even venture to say that Shihei's art is pretty dang good, and she understands anatomy far more than some other artists I've seen. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how does this all tie into the nostalgia I felt when watching my first Harem show, or how you felt in the early aughts as an anime fan? Well... Owie House is the story of two young idiots going to a university in the middle of fucking nowhere. The real Moreland University, not the one named after Alan Moore as Arnold states, is in Oklahoma. So, from now on, this manga takes place in Oklahoma. After these two idiots named Alexis and Sandy are kicked out of their dorms for watching hentai with the door open and drinking boxes full of ramune, they try to find a place that will take them in because of the rule against off-campus living during freshman year. In a moment of cosmic brilliance, the two boys come across an advertisement for the Owie House, Moreland University's anime club that doubles as a boarding house for its members. Discovering after their arrival that this club is primarily women with a fascination with male-on-male cock-spewing action, they join the club out of desperation and the possibility for fun with the opposite sex. What they don't know, however, is that deep within the Owie House itself is a secret, one that could change how these boys view their college experience forever. Its inhabitants are filmed for a budding internet audience of fujoshis wanting a laugh at the extent of others. Yeah, a bit of a wild premise. Yet surprisingly, as I reread this, it actively references other anime with somewhat similar setups. Routinely, I might add. In an attempt to immerse myself in the culture Owie House was developed during, I decided to take a dip into a pond I left long ago in order to regain the same mindset I had at the age of 12. The harem genre. I think many of us got into anime because of this subgenre in some way, or at least grew up seeing one regularly whether we wanted to or not. I luckily watched 2009's Heaven's Lost Property for my first real harem, and my god, it still holds up to this day.
This song is called My Tingly Nips!
Instead of just watching that though, I decided to dig through the anime that were directly referenced in its first chapters. Tenchi Muyo, Chobits, Love Hina, Oh My Goddess. I had seen at least half of these shows before, but never as an adult in our current year where opinions on the harem genre has drastically changed. While anime used to be just as perverse as it is now, the harem genre, and I know Chobits isn't technically a harem, it's a romance, but it's made by Clamp and it was referenced, so just deal with it, in the 2000s was the encapsulation of the lewder side of anime without going into hentai territory. Sure, shit like Girls Bravo very much teeters on the side of exposure when it wants to, and Chobits literally starts with, yeah, that. It doesn't mean the harem genre or anime from that time is inherently horrible or deplorable. At the end of the day, it is a subgenre of romance that is often used to create multiple possible love interests or quickly introduce side characters that may be important to the main plot. Whether that be having your own goddess at your side for all of eternity, taking control of your grandma's hot springs, or getting a fucking rent-a-girlfriend, the harem genre is highly versatile for storytelling when done right despite the tropes attached. If anything, the best harems make you fall in love with the characters just as much as the protagonist does. In a time where the tropes were not only apparent but also homaged and parodied, Owie House sits in the odd place where it doesn't know if it's parody or not. Adam Arnold is a pretty decent writer. He has the occasional witticism that gives you a wry smile if you're not expecting it, and I'll give it to him that one or two of these jokes can be pretty funny. However, when it comes to some of these comedic situations revolving around perversion and panty chasing, it doesn't come off nowadays as funny as it originally was. Most of these sex jokes don't really hit the same. I mean, I'm over the age of 15, I don't think I want to raid any panty drawers, do you? Don't answer that. More than that, there are a lot of problematic elements as much as I hate saying that term. In particular is something mentioned in both the original webcomic and then expanded upon fully in the print run. Carlo. Carlo is the original male founder of Owie House outside of Onisan, the shadowy figure that runs the secret web show. Carlo is non-binary, or at least coded as trans by usage of female pronouns in their choice of clothing. There is some occasional flip-flopping on gender pronouns when it comes to Carlo, but the main issue is the general homophobia surrounding him. More than that, a general heterosexual, fairly male-oriented view of sex. Yes, the name of the club, and by extension the manga itself, is based on a joke about yaoi, a subgenre built on the idea of sexualizing male-on-male relationships. We can go back and forth on whether it's positive representation or just softcore porn all we want, but I think it's how it's approached in Owie House is a little concerning. The 2000s were a different time. Stuff like White Chicks and Team America World Police were in theaters. Positive representations of any LGBT person were seemingly far in the future despite attempts to do so in television or comics prior. And while some of this homophobia for the sake of comedy is kind of excusable, especially love that Carlo's boyfriend is a big slap of beef that I headcanon is the bottom in their relationship, don't judge me, that doesn't mean all of it is. Sure, Alex isn't remotely gay and isn't interested in Carlo in the slightest. That is totally fine, and I think their interactions were somewhat necessary for the plot. I don't need a whole backstory on their transition or their general journey. I just don't want a gay character in a story centered partially around sexual comedy to be a punching bag. And while some of these jokes do run thin in terms of mileage, sex comedy isn't the only part of Owie House's formula. Sure, sex is important to not only the college experience and to harem comedy due to misunderstandings and the like, but it's not the most important thing in the world. That's the grind. Ignore sex. Return to the grind! My favorite moments from Seth MacFarlane's Family Guy are unsurprisingly from the earliest seasons. I don't count anything past and then there were fewer as canon. I just watch it during work sessions as background noise now, and I swear this is relevant for this essay. The reason why I say its earliest seasons are its finest is that it was the period of time when some of the humor didn't have to rely on pop culture references like it would in post-cancellation era. Sure, current Family Guy is now made as a joke vehicle that attempts to be as character-focused as it was during its inaugural run, but it's different from the coziness early Family Guy exuded.
Hey, who wants to play Drink the Beer?
Right here.
You win!
All right, what do I win?
Another beer!
It was crass, obviously, but it was clever and sometimes smarter than we gave it credit for. And when it did use pop culture references as an attempt at humor, it was weirdly niche or focused on making an outright parody instead of just making a reference and clapping. I feel like bringing up Family Guy in an essay about 2000s nostalgia is not only important for making a point, but also impossible to ignore given the humor Owie House is clearly keen on using. As I said previously, the humor of Owie House can be divided into a few subsections: sex comedy in the tradition of harem anime and romantic misunderstandings, character-focused running jokes, and most importantly, pop culture references. Some more niche than others to be sure, but a lot of it is dependent on the fact that you're familiar with the anime of the day. In the first chapter, both in the webcomic and the print run, are references and jokes explicitly spoiling the first episode of Chobits. Throughout the first volume, we get more and more sight gags and yucks at the thought of things we should be familiar with. Moments like, "Alex, look! It's Full Metal Alchemist iPod stickers! I've gotta get them!" Or the great DDR duel are things that stick out in this manga like a sore thumb regarding its humor. Yes, it's funny now in an ironic way, but this was supposed to be played straight back in the day. There are times when the plot jams in as many references to other media as humanly possible, the final arc even taking place in Silent Hill of all places. There's a Heroes reference in this arc. There's also a cameo by Jay and Silent Bob here, I just wanted to say that. They are never seen or heard from again. I'd venture to say that some of this humor is what the kids today call cringe. But that cringe isn't really bad in the grand scheme of things. A lot of Owie House is cringe. It's kind of its draw in a weird way. That cringe is the 2000s anime scene in my eyes. Doing the Hare Hare Yukai in the middle of a parking lot, or looping the caramel dance and animated with characters from Sonic the Hedgehog or something. It's when this ad came out and was deemed serviceable to a con's image.
I love anime!
And manga!
I don't think I can separate anime, despite its immense impact on my taste and my view of consumer media or animation in general, from the cringe that it was associated with during my youth. Naruto running during recess and role-playing over Skype group chat and drinking ramen at your local sushi place. Things like these are why Owie House, despite relying so heavily on such a cheap way to get laughs, does put a smile on my face. Its references may become excessive, but some of it is necessary for exploring its setting and characters. Yet, I found myself thinking about something while reading Owie House. I felt as if I had seen something like it, something similar to its general premise, but with a different vibe. Something actually Japanese, instead of an attempt at world manga, as Jason DeAngelis coined it. Kuchiki Unbalance.
No, I don't! This is the kind of trash I myself too!
Genshiken was a seinen series that ran in Kodansha's monthly mag Afternoon from 2002 to 2006, resulting in 9 tankobons, a sequel series that ran for 12 tankobons, and a 3-season anime that lasted well into the 2010s. Genshiken is a series about a college anime club and the friendships therein. Unlike Owie House, I'd argue Genshiken is both more realistic and more relatable in its execution. Its humor is reliant on you being an otaku, being familiar with its culture, but also having the cynicism to understand the societal view of otaku culture in a wider context. It tackles the world in the community and around it, as well as our characters progressing past their own adolescence and entering the adult world. Its first episode really sells you on everything there is to know about Genshiken, its dynamics and its vibe. It's musty but broken in, perverse but keenly aware of itself. It's emotionally mature, enough to handle the progression of relationships in a natural way without changing the dynamic too much. I can make a whole video on Genshiken separate to this one, but the point stands that Genshiken is a great piece of fiction to compare Owie House to, references and all. It, like Owie House, even got a spin-off in the form of Kuchiki Unbalance, the in-show anime that the cast regularly watch and talk about. The spin-offs for Owie House are a bit more ethereal, but we'll get to that. You may be asking yourself, again, with your finger up your ass and an inquisitive grin on your face, Hey! What is this even about, really? You haven't gone into the characters in any real way. What's the core of this narrative? The beats that it hits that left such a profound impact on you? You did this to yourself. Alexis Roberts and Sandy Grayson are best friends who went to college in the middle of nowhere, with Sandy's highly intelligent and perverted hamster, Echibu. Moving into the yaoi house, they are subjected to the whims of the girls who live there, acting as yaoi pets on occasion to please their president, Elle Mathers. Elle is our resident Ojo-sama too soon for you girl, one who acts as a romantic rival for Alex's affection after accidentally kissing him during the DDR duel at the end of Volume 1. It also doesn't help that Alex turns into a pretty anime boy when he has his hair down, further burning the loins of everyone attracted to the male sex. The other rival for Alex is Morgan McKnight, who is supposed to be both the mascot girl and the typical cutesy girl that would go except Morgan is a cringy, horny redhead who speaks in leet speak and ends most words in plurals or nya. She is my least favorite girl, but that's not really a hard contest. Sandy's love interest that came out of his weirdly forced love triangle is the well-endowed Mexican-American Maria Ortega, who's shy and joins the club around the same time the boys do. She has a love of yaoi much like the rest of the girls, but is much more mousy and more bookish. Jessica Kim is the oldest of 4 children, 3 of which are male triplets, who's the ara mommy of the group, playing matchmaker as she goes through pre-med. It is also canon that she works in the very same hospital Grey's Anatomy takes place in during the epilogue. Yes, there's an epilogue. The last of the girls is Nina Parker, the rebellious smoker and vice president of Owie House that is pretty much the tomboy goth of your dreams. She drinks, she does karaoke, she has her own lesbian stalker whose one joke kind of runs thin halfway through its own volume. These are the girls in a nutshell, a pile of tropes placed in a very tropey scenario where the male leads are at the mercy of their female roommates. Throughout the first 2 volumes, we start to learn more about the cast in small ways that color their interactions, eventually leading to a romantic scene between Alex and Morgan during Christmas when the gang snowed in. There's panty raids and perving on locker rooms, trips to the mall and local amusement parks, but everything in Owie House's first volume can be considered set up for the real star of the show. Owie House in love! Really laying on the Tenchi Muyo references, Adam. I know it's your favorite anime other than Sailor Moon, but come on. Owie House in Love is the second season of Owie House, pretty much, taking place over the course of several weeks in the winter before smash cutting to a montage of events we never get to properly explore. These are the last 2 volumes of Owie House other than its lost episode, but it's pretty important for every character moving forward. It reveals the identity of Onisan as, spoilers, Elle's brother Jacob, who is raking in the big bucks and will later do another run of Owie House with a completely different set of students. We meet Owie House, the alternate to Owie House at a rival university that is more than aware of Owie House's reputation. We get a love triangle explored between Elle, Alex, and inevitably Owie House's leader, Mason Blue. We finally get confirmation that Maria indeed likes Sandy despite his intense awkwardness, and finally get an exploration of the yaoi genre through the lens of the Yaoi 801 panel the group host. Despite being dated, and very much so, it's still pertinent to fandoms within the anime subculture to this day. It can even be applied to modern Western cartoons because every adult who watches them is either a man-child or is on the internet way too much. This is also where we meet the best dated walking pop culture reference in the form of the UA SOS Brigade. Another college club whose leader Audrey LARPs as Haruhi Suzumiya every waking moment, which I am all for as a Haruhi fan, but won't make sense to the uninitiated. Honestly, when I got around to reading Owie House in Love, I really became comfortable with the comedy and general writing choices made in Owie House. It became less of a journey down memory lane for the sake of content creation and more of a fun ride through familiar territory I was completely invested in. While the drama isn't the most complex or even deep for that matter, it's executed well enough to convince the audience that there has been character development up until now. Everything they did in this arc made sense compared to the rest of Owie House. And then the final arc happened. The final arc that takes place primarily in the fictional video game town known as Silent Hill is where the series changes from a lighthearted harem comedy into a horror action series, and then immediately back to comedy when we leave. It's jarring if you couldn't tell. It was something Adam Arnold came up with in the development of the final episodes for Owie House, and I can see how it was both fun to write and great to draw for Shihei. I just felt it came out of nowhere when we had zero sci-fi elements up until that point. If you don't count the weird pervy hamster and his inevitable impregnation of a female pig. This manga is weird. Regardless, Elle and Owie House come to the rescue of the missing Owie House, defeat a shape-shifting semen demon, and leave the town of Silent Hill with a baby Cthulhu attached to their trunk. This creature is only included in group shots here on out. We don't explain its existence any further than this, and the supernatural elements could have been eliminated from Owie House entirely, and it still would have felt the same. The epilogue is after this, where it shows our main men got married to their clubmates, the various episodes Adam Arnold planned to do but didn't have time, and the tease of the Lost episode, which I should finally get into. The Lost episode of Owie House is not really about Owie House as it is about Paranormal Mystery Squad, a later work of Adam Arnold that spun out of Vampire Cheerleaders, the book that came out during Owie House's run. It's drawn pretty much the same, just with added softcore lesbian sex. I am so sorry, Mom, if you're watching this, and that this was indeed on your Kindle. I did this to myself. The Lost episode is essentially the goth Lolita protagonist, the Paranormal Mystery Squad, joining Owie House, taking them back to Silent Hill for yet another trippy excursion, and leaving just as quickly when new girl Stephanie and Elle take out the semen demon again. It's really short, though you can see some progression between the final volume of Owie House's art and this book's from shading alone. The Lost episode feels like a good farewell to Owie House, even though I do prefer the final chapters of In Love more. Yet, that's beside the point. Owie House would end its run in 2009, Adam Arnold still continuing to license work as 7C's senior editor. There are still hardcovers out there on Amazon and digital versions on site like Bookwalker for Owie House, if you're indeed interested in this story. Yet after going over all the important details for Owie House and its publication history, I feel sad that the journey is over. Sure, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The flaws I've named, and some I've probably glossed over, are notable for a reason in a work like this, and I doubt people are just going to read cringe for cringe's sake. I read this, wrote this script, and edited this video purely out of love for the time period this came out in. Truth be told, there will probably never be another work like Owie House ever again. Sure, maybe something will take place in an anime club, but it won't give off the same vibe it or Genshiken did. Harems have long since evolved past the tropes Owie House aped and refined them, making you waste your time on something much more chaotic and overall enjoyable. Maybe it's something to do with the internet not being fast enough yet, maybe it's to do with the marketability of something so niche when anime and manga were causing a cultural paradigm shift. Maybe it's to do with my own blind nostalgia, I can't be certain. I just know that a work like this is special. Special to me and probably a handful of others, physically embodying our adolescence and developing tastes. I miss the feeling anime used to give me when I got hooked on a new show or found a new manga that I hadn't seen anyone talk about. Now you think you've found something so obscure that no one else has probably read it, and soon enough it's been trending on Twitter for weeks. Sure, it's feeling special for something that's widely available to everyone if you just look, but when you're a kid, that doesn't matter. When you were young, you saw everything with rose-tinted glasses and a curiosity to learn. You thought of anime as something new, exciting, and different from the media you've seen before. It may be Japanese cartoons and comics printed on cheap paper, but being an otaku isn't as culturally taboo as it used to be. Sure, we may be shunned once or twice for our takes on My Hero Academia being a shit pile and that goes double for your name, but now we're able to have those discussions in a public place without judgment. Now anime is just as normal as comic books are, or professional wrestling, or just plain old TV. When I think of Owie House, I don't think of all the things I've previously noted. Instead, I'm reminded of a simpler time. When I was watching Naruto episodes in 3 parts on an adless YouTube on my dad's computer, staying up too late watching Digimon Frontier under my bedsheets. It was a time I felt happy. And because I took a look at Owie House again, even remembering it at all, it caused something warm and fuzzy to grow within me. Nostalgia is a dangerous tool in the wrong hands. Corporations weaponize it for financial purposes, and that's something I can't ignore. True nostalgia comes from your own experiences, your own feelings about something and how it shaped you going forward. And as much as I want to go back to those earlier days, I'm an adult now. I grew up. There's no going back to the Shire. I think that's okay, though. I think that despite everything, I'm okay. We grow, we change, we move on, and we remember the good times when we're feeling blue. That's just human nature. That's just life. Read Owie House, and thank you for watching.